So good morning. Today is the week. It's part of the week where we celebrate Purim, which is on Thursday night, and this is also, we're coming up on what is called Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of remembering. And I'm going to be talking about both of those things. Purim is a very challenging holiday for me, and I suspect that I'm not alone about that. I acknowledge that I don't like the Purim story. There's actually nothing about that story that I like. However, I've been exposed to some interesting ways of looking at the holiday that I think are important. So I am putting the actual story aside and looking kind of under the covers, if you will, which seems like a perfect metaphor for that story. Anyway, Purim is a time when people put on masks and costumes. In an interview that I listened to between Rabbi Amichai Lau Levy, the founder of the Lab Shul in New York, and Rabbi Josh Feigelson, who is the executive director of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, they talked about the power of putting on a costume and inhabiting it. Really taking the time and the energy to feel what it's like to be in someone else's skin. We use the phrase to walk in someone else's shoes, but what's it really feel like? And Rabbi Amichai shared his experience a few years ago of wearing a MAGA hat and how incredibly uncomfortable he was. And he didn't just wear it at Purim and at the shul where everyone would have known that he was in a costume. He wore it when he was out on the streets with his children giving shulach manot, and I think I'm butchering up how you say that, but baskets of food. So he really had some reactions to his being out wearing this MAGA hat. And he said he was really, really uncomfortable, and he really learned a lot from the experience. He also talked about Purim as a time of transition, a time when we can try on new identities, like him wearing the MAGA hat, and maybe a time when we can strip away the masks that we usually wear and uncover our true nature. He sees Purim as a time to uncover our shadow side. So that's the part of ourselves that we don't necessarily like. But it could also be just looking at how we blur the lines between the real and the unreal, between the sacred and the profane, between our, just looking at our binary way of looking at most things. So this whole interview led me to thinking about how we often wear figurative masks as we go through our daily lives. So not even just big shadow stuff, but sometimes pretending to feel well, or sometimes pretending to know something that we don't know, or to like something that we don't like. Some of us also wear masks to hide part of ourselves that we're afraid of or don't like very much. He gave an example of a very, very prim and proper conservative rabbi, woman, female, who one Purim let her very sexy inner self out, and in the process realized that she was really repressing stuff, and later decided, or didn't, she decided how she was going to deal with that. So there are lots of ways to kind of play with this whole notion of masks, unmasking and donning masks. So that's that piece of it. I had another really interesting experience this past week. Last week, one of the IJS meditations that I participated in, Rabbi Jenny Solomon led the meditation. And during that meditation, she shared 6 remembrances as outlined by Rabbi Isaac Luria. My understanding is that these 6 examples are all from the Torah, and they point us to different aspects of remembering that are all important. So I'm going to briefly share them and what I think personally is important about each one of those. So the first was our exodus from Egypt. And for me, this is about remembering resilience. And the second is the revelation at Sinai, that we're, these are all things that we're told to remember. And for me, the revelation of Sinai reminds me to remember that I do have a personal relationship with the divine. Not everybody does, I do. And I should remember that. The third is Amalek's attack on Israel. And for me, that represents the need to remember the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that shoving aside the unpleasant is really, in the long run, not helpful for me. The fourth is the remembering the golden calf and the rebellion in the desert. And for me, that's to remember to be very wary of the seductive false gods that I am drawn to. And materialism, and my account at Amazon Prime is on that list of examples. The fifth is to remember Miriam's negative speech. And that reminder for me is really obvious about remembering mindful speech. Watch my words. And the sixth is to remember the Sabbath. And for me, that's remembering to take care of myself, remembering that it's a mitzvah to rest. So I take these 6 remembrances and the notion of paying attention to masks, and I'm challenging myself this Purim to uncover my true nature. And that's how I am dealing with this holiday, which I find so challenging. So with that, I invite us all to take our seats. So find your comfortable place. Really feel your sits bones wherever it is that you're sitting. Notice your contact points with the floor and with your chair or cushion. And let's take a few cleansing breaths. Inhaling as deeply as you're able, holding it, and slowly exhaling fully through your mouth. So that exhale, if possible, should be like you're blowing out a candle on a birthday cake. So you want to do that very slowly. Let's take a few more breaths like this, really settling. And I invite you to decide on a particular focal point for today's meditation. Maybe it's your breath, or maybe a physical sensation in your body. Or maybe you're using a mantra. Knowing your focal point and sort of saying it to yourself may be helpful as your mind wanders, which we know it will. You can return to that focal point each time your mind wanders. And we'll sit for about 10 minutes. As we come back to the room, I'm going to read you a poem by Joy Harayo. The name of this poem is Remember. Remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember. So I am now turning off the recording.